When you picture East Africa, you probably imagine flat, endless plains filled with tall grass and roaming lions. But the physical landscape is heavily broken. This region holds deep, massive trenches and a towering reality of jagged mountain peaks. To see this big picture, we first need to define our borders. When geographers study traditional East Africa, they are looking specifically at a region made up of just 3 countries: Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. You might hear about the East African Community on the news. That is a political group that includes many more neighboring countries joining together to trade and pass laws. But for our physical map, we stick strictly to those original 3 nations. Mapping this dramatic terrain comes down to measuring its relief. That is just a geographer's term for the physical shape of the land, specifically the vertical distance between its deepest dips and its highest summits. Think of East Africa's relief not as a flat floor, but as a massive 1,000-kilometer-wide staircase that rises right out of the ocean. Let's walk up those stairs, starting at the bottom. Our first step, right next to the Indian Ocean, is the coastal plain. Found in Kenya and Tanzania, this land is flat, hot, and sits just barely above sea level. Uganda completely misses out on this bottom step. Because it is landlocked, meaning it is entirely surrounded by land with no ocean access, it has no coastal plain at all. Moving inland from the coast, the land rises sharply in a giant step. This takes us up to the central plateau. A plateau is a huge flat area raised high up, where most of East Africa sits. Looking here, you'll see a massive size difference between countries. This chart shows Tanzania is the largest by area, while Uganda is smallest. But size can be deceiving. Even though Tanzania has hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of land, much of it is incredibly dry, leaving huge areas practically empty. Tiny Uganda, however, packs in millions of people, sitting almost shoulder to shoulder. Uganda can support so many people because of its specific location on the plateau. It sits right next to Lake Victoria. This massive water source, combined with the high elevation, gives Uganda heavy, reliable rain and rich soils. When soil can easily feed a family year-round, communities gather tightly around it. The physical relief and fertility of the land dictate where people live, regardless of how wide a country's borders stretch. Now, a plateau might sound like a perfectly smooth tabletop, but East Africa's floor has heavy geological disruptions. If you travel far enough across the high flat land, the earth suddenly plunges downward into a massive steep trench. This is the Rift Valley. The western branch of this trench is deep enough to hold Uganda's major lakes. However, the very bottom of the Rift Valley is often too hot, dry, and rocky to support large farming settlements. If the Rift Valley is a crack in the floor, our final relief region is the ceiling. Sitting heavily on top of the plateau are the highlands and mountains. These are huge rock structures piled onto the plateau. Mountains like Mount Elgon or the Rwenzori Range reach so high into the atmosphere they maintain freezing, snow-capped peaks right in the tropics. Our geographical staircase is now mapped. We step from the coastal plains, climb the vast central plateau, drop into the Rift Valley, and look up at the highlands. But how do geographers put a 1,000-kilometer 3D staircase onto a flat piece of paper you can study in a classroom? They solve this using contour lines, rings connecting places of the exact same height. When spaced far apart, the slope is gentle and the land is mostly flat. But when squeezed tightly together, the relief drops sharply, marking a steep mountainside or sheer cliff. Those steep contour lines mark areas where daily life gets complicated. People build homes on these sharp highlands because the mountainsides often provide dark volcanic soil, which is excellent for growing cash crops like Arabica coffee. But farming on a severe slope carries a deadly risk. When heavy seasonal rains pound these mountainsides, the water mixes with the soil, gravity pulls downward, and the earth simply gives way. This creates sudden, violent landslides or flash floods. In Uganda, districts built into extreme mountain relief, like Bududa on Mount Elgon or Kasese near the Rwenzoris, face these terrible natural hazards repeatedly. Seeing the shape of the land explains exactly why East Africans farm where they do, why millions of people cluster in specific corners, and how mapping the terrain helps communities stay safe from the land's hidden dangers.